We can all gather on that side by the chairs.
Okay, thank you.
אתה ליד סבתא וסבתא לידי, וסבתא באמצע. אבל עוד לא. עוד לא.
חכה קצת.
יש לך קצת זמן, יאללה.
ביי ביי.
מזמור לדוד, אדוני אלוהי לא יחסר בנוי סתשי יביצני, עמי מנוחו שנאה עליני, נפשי שבי ויחני במעגל צדק למען שמו, גם כי הלך בגט עמו ואס לעיר הרע, כי אתה עמדי, שבתך משענתך, המה ינחמוני, תערך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, תשענת בשם אלוהי כיסא רוויה, טוב וחסד לפני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He has me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He revives my soul. He guides me on paths of righteousness for his glory. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you, God, are with me. Your rod and your staff do comfort me. You set a table in sight of my enemies. You anoint my head with rich oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. I'm sure you heard this psalm before, especially at funerals. We say it also in tefillah, but at funerals it's pretty much customary to begin or sometime during the funeral to say Mizmor David. Why? Why all of a sudden are we talking about God being the shepherd? So the psalm expresses the most intimate, personal relationship of man with our beloved God. Troubles may occur, agony may strike the soul, but there's one comforting thought: the Lord is my shepherd. As a shepherd seeks to guide and care for his flock. We don't really see shepherds around in Chicago, but we understand what a shepherd is. A shepherd is there to guide and care for his flock. He seeks fertile pastures in which his sheep may graze. He always stays very close to his flock. He helps them grow and develop. As he lovingly embraces and he raises up the sheep who perhaps have been injured, so does our God, the divine shepherd. He watches over his flock. We, the members of the flock, may sometimes in our despair, we may doubt the justice of the shepherd. We may not understand, and we do not understand his ways, but we are confident that he is concerned with our welfare, and he'll take care of his flock. And we say, King David says in this chapter, he has me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. And so even if sometimes, as is inevitable, I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm. For you, God, you're with me. I know you're with me under all circumstances. Your rod and your staff comforts me. I know that the rod of the shepherd seeks to guide me. It's there for my sake. However strange that path may sometimes be, however puzzled I may be by the evil that we come across. Nevertheless, my faith in the divine shepherd gives me the confidence to proclaim that only goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. Sometimes I get up and I officiate at a funeral of younger adults, unfortunately. But it makes no difference if the person is 80, 90, or 119, 120. Especially if this is a wife, a mother, a grandmother, it hurts. It hurts and it makes no difference. Yes, thank God. What I heard, I did not know her. What I heard, she had a good life and she passed away peacefully in her home. It still hurts. It's still someone I would love to have her much, much longer. But we have to be thankful because we have a God and He is our shepherd and He watches over us. So we're gathered here today to pay tribute and respect and bid farewell to Hulda Shamoul, Hulda Bat Malka, a beloved wife to Moshe, beloved mother of Avrali and the late Orit, proud grandmother of Roy, Lihi, and Sarah. Forgive me if I didn't pronounce the names. But
Rabbi, it's
perfect,
perfect.
okay. Cherished great-grandmother of Omri, Shaili, Yoav, Or, Ella, and Aviv. No doubt she was a blessed mother and wife, mother and grandmother, to have beautiful family with her. Again, Simcha can testify, sometimes I go to a funeral, there's no one there. Not because the family don't want to come because of COVID. There's just no one there. No Zooming. And we take too many things for granted. When there are children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, what a bracha. What a bracha. But at the same time, I did not know her. So I thought it would be only right to have family members eulogize her, the ones that knew her best. And the purpose of a eulogy is not only so we can hear what happened in the past with grandmother or with mother. The purpose of a eulogy is so that we can learn from her. And we can apply that in our daily life. So we can get up one day and say, let me do what grandma did, what my mother did. Let me follow in her footsteps. So what are the footsteps we want to follow? We're going to hear that now from family members, grandchildren. Roy?
Rabbi, Rabbi.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Usually I try to freestyle it, but I wasn't 100% sure I can do that today. It's a little bit emotional, obviously. First of all, thank you everybody for coming today. Each and every one of you is dear friend, family to us. We've got family in France and in Israel who are participating. Obviously, this was a very short notice. She passed away at 7:28 this morning. And so thank you everyone for jumping on this and coming in a very short notice. And for the Bitten family, who I wasn't expecting them here, but certainly much appreciated. And not too long ago, we were in the same situation for you. So I want to, most of you knew my grandmother, at least had dinner with her or spent some time with her. But you knew her when she was a lot older and lost a couple steps. She was pretty feisty when she was younger. So I just thought I would tell you a little bit about her and the history of our family and how we came to be here in 2021. But we go back. My grandfather's 97, so the history of our family goes back much more than that, but the immediate history goes back maybe 97 years, almost 100 years, and intertwined with everything that happened in the state of Israel before its formation and through today. My grandmother was born in Vienna in 1928. Vienna at that time was, very important European city, and she was very proud of her Austrian origin and what it meant. In 1934, the story goes, and my mother, she loved a good story. My grandmother loved a good story. She loved a good story, so a lot of these stories that she tells, many of them are based on true events, but not necessarily exactly happened like that. But the story was more important than the accurate events that happened. But anyway, so the story goes in 1934, her mother, who she loved dearly and was very close to, had a dream, and in that dream, she saw the angel of death hovering over Europe or Austria. I'm not sure exactly what it was. And she got up the next morning and she said, something terrible is going to happen. I'm going to take my two very young children and I'm going to take them from this European city to what then was the desert of Palestine. At that time, you couldn't jump on an airplane and fly over, and 10 hours later be in Israel. So it was a very, very long and difficult journey by foot and by boat. This was probably, if you told this story today, it's probably a Netflix blockbuster, but just the way they got there through Lebanon at the time, and they almost got sent back in Lebanon, eventually made it to Palestine. And in that time, there was the British mandate in Israel, and they would not let just Jewish settlers come into the country, so they had to, at the dead of night, on a boat, steal the border. They were met by Haganah and Palmach fighters on the beach, who basically smuggled them into Israel, and they were transferred to some host families, and later on, and that's how they got to Tel Aviv. So that's how she first came to Israel, and when she came to Israel, they thought that her German name was not good enough because everybody was very patriotic at the time, so they called her Hulda. Hulda is a prophet in the Bible, one of the three female prophets in the Bible, but it also means a rat in Hebrew. So she did not like that name at all. Hulda Neviah, it's an important character in the Bible, but for a young child to be called rat was not the best of experiences. So over the years, they changed her name to Huli, or she was referred to as Huli, but her original name, Ilse, in German means small light or sunlight. I believe sunlight, which I think is a lot more appropriate name, even though they changed her name when she came to Israel. I think that's a lot more appropriate name for somebody like my grandmother. She was, she had zest for life. She was always, I remember growing up, she was, always a center of attention. She was a performer. She always liked to entertain people. She loved people. So I think that's a much more appropriate name for her, Ilse, sunlight. Our family's, my grandparents' history is very much intertwined with the formation, as I said, of the State of Israel. They were there, like everything you guys learn in school now about Jewish history, they were part of it. They were there when, in 1947, when the United Nations voted. They were voted on the formation of Israel. There was a formation of an Israeli and an Arab state at the time. And they were there, they were listening to the radio and counting the votes. And they went out and danced in the street when they voted for it. They're there in 1948, Hey B'Yar Tashach, when Ben Gurion gave the Declaration of Independence, the Israeli Declaration of Independence, and they were there the next day when the War of Liberation started, when we were attacked by 7 Arab nations. My grandfather took part of that war, and then they were there. They were there through 6 other wars, and they are, for me, a testament to what Jewish strength is, and especially now, I think it's important to talk about this and be proud of who we are and what we stand for, given what happened the last couple of weeks in Israel, and what we and people like my grandparents had to endure and fight for, so we have a state and a nation that we could call home. On a personal level, my grandparents came from humble beginning. They both came from immigrant families. They came to Israel. Both their families came. They had nothing when they brought what they could carry, and that's it. These were tough times in Israel. Money was not available. Jobs were not available. But together, they fought, they endured, they started their family with my uncle Avrali. My grandfather we had a couple jobs, but eventually worked for Bank Leumi for many years. Started as a clerk, teller, I think, and then, over the years, climbed the ladder and then became management. My grandmother was a teacher, and over the years, she was, and at night they would come home and sew children's clothes for some extra cash. So my grandfather would cut and my grandmother would sew, and that's kind of how they would make extra money to feed their family. They went through Tzena in Israel in the 1950s when there was no money and barely any food, raising young children. So these are all just kind of stations in their life and how they came to be. The most famous story my grandmother tells, and that's, and she tells a lot of stories many times over. But her favorite story is a story how she met my grandfather at the Chinga Bar. Chinga Bar loosely translate as the party bar. This was a bar, yes. This was a bar in Tel Aviv in the 1930s. I looked it up, it exists. I Googled it. Chaim, this is for you. This is the next project. Chinga Bar, the party bar in Tel Aviv. And she tells a story of how he approached her and how they met and how she was at the time with somebody else, but he didn't give up, and he saw her and he loved her, or he really liked her, and he didn't give up, and they eventually got together and married. And up until about 6 weeks ago, when she had seizure, she every day, multiple times a day, would tell him the story of how they met and that he pursued her and not the other way around. It was very important. And he acknowledged that time after time after time, multiple times a day, every day for years. So that, for the record, he pursued her and not the other way around. So my grandparents were married for 75 years. Longer, maybe? 75 years? Saba, kama shanim? A little more. And I guess after 75 years, you stop counting. Maybe close to the 80. 80 years they were together.
It's enough.
It's enough. Thank you. That's it. They believed in family. My grandmother believed in family. They believed that no matter how difficult the challenge is, they can get it done if they do it together. Like, ever since I remember myself, Lee, you probably remember this. My grandmother used to say, a family is like a hand. If the hand is open, each finger could easily be broken. But once you clinch them into a fist, nothing can happen to the family. This was my family from my grandmother. And that's what I remember, and that's how I try to live my life. Family is the most important thing. And she lived it every day. That was her life, and that's what she believed in. From the minute she had met my grandfather, through children, through grandchildren, through great-grandchildren, that was the most important thing in her life. In 2006, my mother got sick with cancer, and she was concerned that if something was to happen to her, they would be left alone by themselves. And she called him up and they said, you gotta come here. I have cancer. 30 days later, just think about it. Like, you get up, they're 80 years old. They got up, they moved to the United States, they sold everything they had, they jumped on a plane, and they were here in 30 days. They didn't care because personal belongings mattered nothing for them. It was my mother's call. She needed them, and then so they came to be with her. And in 2011, she lost her battle with cancer. She passed away. And I think to a certain extent, my grandmother's, zest for life, some of it, diminished a little bit. Not completely. She still was surrounded by family she loved, by her husband, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, who she adored: Omri, Shaili, Yoav, Or, Ella, and Aviv, my sister's children, but a little less. Also, Avi, Lee's husband, and Orit, somewhere here, behind the tree, who she loved also very much. Yesterday was my mother's birthday, May 22nd. My grandmother has been at home for a week and a half, maybe. But I think she was out of it. She wasn't really all there, but I think she knew, and I think she decided to go today because she wanted to be there with my mother on her birthday. My grandmother died this morning. She was 94 years old, surrounded by her husband and her family, who loved her very much. She was at her home. She did not suffer for 1 second. She was at peace. And I think, if there's a way to go, sign me up. That's how I want it. 94. It's amazing. That's it. I just have one more thing to say, and then it kind of like dawned on me this morning. And it's been a really tough week with everything that's going on in Israel. And my grandmother, we've been, every day they've been telling us, okay, she's got 10 days, she's got 24 hours maybe, and and yesterday, Omri and his friends and Dean, George's son, went out and just went out with their friends last night. And a friend of theirs didn't feel well, and he's 16 years old. He's with them since kindergarten. They know him very well, and he didn't feel well. He went home and he lost conscience and hit his head, and he is in the hospital in ICU right now, and we don't know what's going to happen with him. Everybody's praying for him, and his father and mother are very good friends of mine, so I've been kind of texting back and forth with him all night, just to see what's going on, and then to make sure if they need something, we're there for them. And this morning I've been texting with him, and I went to see my grandmother at 7:15. She passed away 15 minutes later. The caregiver called me to come over. And I was texting back and forth with my friend. And when the caregiver called me, just this crazy thought came to my mind. And I said, that's Hori doing the last she can. She's going upstairs to talk to the boss to make sure that kid lives. That was my grandmother. That's the essence of Huli. She was selfless. And I really believe because she could have died. She was ready to go. But she didn't die for 10 days. And I'm like, why? And I think maybe that's why. Thank you.
לא חשבתי שזה יהיה לי כל כך קשה לעמוד פה ולדבר. כל הזמן חשבתי, זאת אומרת, שהיא תלך, אז באמת נחגוג את החיים שלה, ולא כל כך נצטער כל כך, ואני לא ידעתי שאני ארגיש כל כך עצובה. אבל זה המצב. וגם המילים של רועי כמובן מאוד ריגשו אותי, ולראות את רועי בדמעות, זה לא חושבת שזה קרה לי, אולי כשאימא שלי הלכה. זה... לא היה לי הרבה זמן לכתוב משהו באמת ולהקריא, אבל פשוט רוצה להגיד לסבתא היקרה שלי שאני אוהבת אותה, שאהבתי אותה כל החיים שלי, שהייתי ילדה מאוד קטנה, היא כל הזמן הייתה שם. פשוט היא כל הזמן הייתה איתי, כל הזמן. אני זוכרת אותה מילדה קטנה, חותכת לי עגבניות ושמה לי את העגבנייה ככה, ואומרת לי, בואי שבי, תאכלי את העגבנייה ואני אספר לך סיפור. אבל חייבת לאכול את כל העגבנייה בשביל לשמוע את הסיפור. והייתה ממציאה סיפורים מדהימים, ככה מהדמיון שלה. היה לה דמיון מדהים, הייתה אישה מדהימה, הייתה אישה טובה. מה שהרב אמר שיעבור אלינו ללא ספק, זה ה-kindness. She was a kind person. היא תמיד הייתה נותנת מחמאות לאנשים שהייתה רואה. זה לא משהו שמובן מאליו, אני חושבת שאם הייתה רואה סתם, אדם שהייתה פוגשת אותו לרגע, הייתה יכולה, סתם במעלית, יכולה פתאום להחמיא, אוי איזה אישה יפת, או אוי איזה בן אדם נחמד, והיא הייתה פשוט אישה טובה ומדהימה. כשהייתי ילדה, וגם האמת לא רק ילדה, היא הייתה רצה אחריי עם גרביים, 80 מעלות בחוץ חם, והיא רצה אחריי לגרוב גרביים, ליקוש, תגרבי גרביים, שלא יהיה לך קר ברגליים. זה היה הסבתא שלי. תמיד הייתה שם בשבילנו, בשביל אמא שלי, וגם סבא, כמובן, לידה, לאורך כל הדרך, יד ביד. לעולם לא נפרדו, אפילו לא לרגע. היו ביחד. אני לא חושבת היה יום אחד בחיים שלהם שהם נפרדו, אולי שסבא היה בצבא, או שהוא היה בבית חולים, נכון, לפני שנתיים. או כשהיא הייתה בבית חולים. אבל מעבר לזה, הם פשוט כל החיים היו ביחד, והאיחוד המשפחתי הזה והאהבה הזאת, זה משהו שישאר איתי תמיד. סבתא יקרה, אני אוהבת אותך, אני לא אשכח אותך לעולם. את תמיד תישארי בלב שלי. סבתא שלי כתבה ספר, וזה היה, אני חושבת, המפעל חיים של הזקנה שלה, שהיא מאוד הייתה גאה בו. והיא כתבה את הספר, היא סיימה לכתוב אותו כשהיא הייתה, אני חושבת, בת 86. זה לקח לה כמה שנים. ורציתי להקריא כמה קטעים קטנים פשוט מהספר. לא את כל הספר, אל תדאגו. היא רשמה פה מאחורה. המשפחה שלנו לדורותיה מונה 200 פחות שנה אחת, 8 דורות. מ-1815 חיים נייגר הדור הראשון, עד 2014 הולדת 4 הנינים שלנו, הדור השמיני. 3 יבשות, אירופה, אסיה, אמריקה הצפונית. בכל הארצות המשפחה הייתה שותפה באירועים הרי גורל, כגון אבעבועות שחורות, פוגרומים, שואה, לחימה בשלטון הבריטי בארץ, הכרזת העצמאות, הקמת מדינת ישראל ועוד. המשפחה סבלה גם טרגדיות משפחתיות, אבל במרבית הזמן חיינו היו טובים. האהבה, השמחה והליכוד המשפחתי גברו על הכל. היא רשמה בספר פה את היולוגי שהיא אמרה על אימא שלי, כשאימא שלי נפטרה. אז חלק קטן מזה היה, אמי לימדה אותי שהייתי ילדה צעירה, אם דבר טוב הקורה לנו מסתיים, אל לנו להצטער על שזה נגמר, אלא לשמוח על שזה בכלל אירע. כך שלמרות שכולנו כואבים ודואבים מאוד את עזיבתך מחיינו ואין נחמה, עדיין אנו מרגישים מבורכים ואסירי תודה על הזמן שניתן לנו לשהות במחיצתך. אז סבתא, אני אומרת לך את אותם דברים. ועוד היא כתבה, לקראת הסוף, בחודש ינואר בשנת 2004 הייתי בת 76 שנה כשהתחלתי את כתיבת הספר בעיר כפר סבא, ישראל. בחודש ינואר שנת 2014 אני בת 86 שנה לקראת סיום כתיבתו של הספר בעיר שיקגו, ארצות הברית. ובזאת כתיבת חלק הראשון בסאגה המשפחתית המסתיימת במעבר שלנו לארצות הברית תם, אבל לא נשלם. אולי אמשיך לספר.
אתה רוצה להגיד משהו?
I'd like to end with a few words, but I would like to also acknowledge the presence of Rabbi Baruch Hertz, the rabbi of Congregation B'nai Ruvain, and a dear friend and rabbi of the extended family. I heard you say that you cannot forget your grandmother. I heard that. But there's one thing about not to forget, and then there's another thing is what can we do to always remember? So lo todava. Can't forget? Of course you can't forget. But what can we do to always remember a woman like this? What's the answer? The answer is, if we do mitzvot, ma'asim tovim, in her memory, that's how her memory now is alive. So we don't have to talk about her in the past, but everything she taught you and she taught everybody else becomes something of the present. I am going to do this and this mitzvah, adlakat hanerot, whatever it may be. I'm doing it in her zchut, okay, in her merit and in her memory. Then she continues to live on amongst all of those that knew her. Last week at this time, we were getting ready for Chag Shavuot, exactly a week ago. And the halacha is for 1 week, although the holiday is only one day in Israel, Be'eretz, Rak Yom Echad, here, Yomayim, but nevertheless, we continue somehow the celebration for 1 week. Because of that, the prayers are abbreviated if there's a funeral till the end of today's day. Eternal God, creator, merciful Father of all, your children bowed in grief, they seek light to dispel the dark gloom which threatens to overwhelm them. Be gracious to those who mourn, for they are in distress. Bless them with your compassion. Ease their burden of sorrow. Send them light and peace. For as it is written, fear not, as I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. And I will sustain you with my power. Merciful Father, strengthen those who mourn the loss of Hulda Shamoul, Hulda Bat Malka. Help them to look beyond this moment. Help them to realize that death cannot destroy the bonds of your everlasting love. Sustain them with the knowledge of our faith, that you will not abandon our souls, that you will not allow your faithful to suffer. For you, Almighty, have taught us the real way of life. Let us all say Amen. We will not say the Kilmal Rachman today. We will continue with the actual burial, and we'll do the Kriyana. time to ask Mechila in case something was not done 100%. I think things were done 110%. But in case something that we missed out or in the past, so this is an appropriate time to ask Mechila, and there's no doubt that the Neshama is going to forgive us. I don't recall the last time there was a funeral from in the past until the funeral in 7800. This is a big strip for the Neshama.
He wanted his assistant. We're going to put the vault cover right. Right? Right.
First one start upside down, and then go ahead.
I will match the handle.
Yeah, very good. זה הכל. אתה רוצה לשחק בקבוצה שלך נראה לי, לא אתה בסדר. לא קיבלו אותי, לא קיבלו אותי. ניסיתי, אני ניסיתי. חסה שם, בוא נתנסה שם.
Ahora Lupe.
Yeah.
this. המלצח ונקרא לך מזמשים וזוז כל המאזין לקריש וכל עד גם בני אדם גם בני איש יחד אושר ואביון פידה בחכמייס וגוס ליבי סיבון יודעת למה שלא אוזני אפילו בכני חידוסי למה אירה במאירה אבינה קיבה יוסבני הבית מאכילה מברב אשת מיסללו אך לפדה יפתה איש להיתן אלוהים כפרי יקפיתי נש וחד אלוהים וכי נס אלוהים שחס כי יהיה חכמים מוזי יחד כיסו ובר יבדו ועוזבו לאחרים חילם כי מבטים לילה משכנס מדבת אל קרב ושפס מלא אדם מייס ואדם ביקר בעל יולים נמשל כבהם מייס נדמו זה דעקם כסל לא מבחים מפים יתסל קצים וששת יבומוס ירם וידבם ישרם לבק וצום בעל שאל מזבולוי אך אלוהים יפתה נפש מיד שאל כי ככי ניסה לגעת ירקיע שיש כי בכבד ביסי כלב המייס יקחק ליד אחב כבדי כי נש בחי וברך וידוך כיסית לך תבוא ידוי רבי סוף הנצח לירו עיר אדם ביקר ולא יובן נמשל כבהם מייס נדמו Okay, we'll say it together? Ma? Regular. Yeah. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah v'yamad divrach yutei v'yamlich machutei v'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei t'chobet Yisrael ba'agala ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יש שמי רבה מברך עולם עולמי עמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו ואלה כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה חיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן עושה שלום במלמה והוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן זה הכל זהו. בינתיים זהו. בשביל היום מספיק. Amen. Okay. All right, with this we conclude. We're going to make a shura. Simcha, we're going to make a shura.
Yeah, we'll do it over here. We're going to go this way.
Okay. לעמוד שתי שורות.
חזק.
המקום ינחם אתכם בתוך שער שערי ציון בירושלים. המקום ינחם אתכם בתוך שער שערי ציון בירושלים. יהיה רק שמחות.